And this is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services. We're in Verona, New York at the Independent Bankers Association of New York State Conference. Just heard a terrific presentation on public information, how to make a statement, how to work with the media, and talk was with Patrick Dix of Shazam. And Patrick, great to see you. What's been a highlight of your visit here to the New York State Independent Bankers meeting?
This is my first time to the Ibanez conference, and all of these, I travel around the country and I go to a lot of these state banking association organizations, and New York is similar and different. It's similar in that you've got a group of really committed community bankers in that room who are, they're here to learn something. They're here to make sure that they stay on top of. There's so many hats they have to wear, and so weeks like this are really critical for them to get a little bit of information about a lot of different things, take it back to the bank, and so we really think it's incredibly valuable for us to step up. At Shazam, we're member owned, we're nonprofit. We think it's critical to step up at events like this and make sure that we're adding to the education that they bring back to the bank, and really be a partner, an expert partner for them to lean on when they need it.
And you had an excellent case example of COVID, of a bank who wanted to disclose that two of their employees had come down with COVID, and you felt they did a pretty good job with that. Tell us about it.
Yeah, there was a bank in the Midwest, and really early on in COVID, there was so much misinformation, there was so much confusion about it. People were scared, and fear tends to bring us to actions that we wouldn't normally do, and make bad decisions sometimes. This bank, thankfully, they had gone through some of the media training that we do. They called, they said, "We've got two employees that have tested positive. They're the first two in our town. We're going to have to shut down a branch." And they said, "What do we do?" And the leadership was leaning toward, don't say anything. But they'd gone through our training, and what they'd really learned is that if they are open with their community, if they say it in the right way, if they're as transparent as they possibly can be, that really people appreciate that today. The public appreciates that today. Their customers really appreciated how transparent they were. And so instead of fear, it was replaced with information. They were really level-headed about it. They had a plan for their customers. Everybody was safe. Their employees got through COVID okay, and they learned from it. They learned to kind of weather that bump in the road that they had, but at least it was just a bump in the road and not a huge pothole that they fell into because they didn't say anything, and then people learned that their employees had COVID. That's when people start making up their own story instead of using the information that's out there.
Another good example you mentioned was that of an airline executive after the incident, the Miracle on the Hudson, being able to make a statement just within, I think, 90 minutes of the incident happening. Fortunately, he had good news that he could share, but he had to be very cautious. Tell us a little bit about that case.
There are a lot of things to learn, I think, from Doug Parker's statement after the U.S. Airways crash on the Hudson. And one of them was that they were really prepared. They had just gone through a critical incident tabletop exercise that focused on communications. So they really were ready to be a part of this. So that pre-planning is one of the big lessons, to go ahead and make sure that you do that every year or more often than that to mitigate the risk of some of these big incidents. But then I think what he showed us in that initial statement was he didn't say much. He said a lot of just really procedural things that they knew were going to happen. He told us what he could, but he didn't speculate on anything. Said that they would fully cooperate. That initial statement was a really good kickoff to what was going to be a long process for them to get through as a company, but it set them up well to get through with a better reputation at the end of that incident instead of a reputation that was harmed in some way because they weren't forthcoming.
Absolutely, and one of your key pieces of advice was that no comment is not an acceptable response. Why do you find that as the case?
Because it never works out. If you don't comment and you feel like you get through it, I think you forget that there's an audience on, reading the newspaper or on the other side of the television that is listening to that. And just ask yourself, when you hear somebody say, we tried to reach out to Mr. Dix for comment and he had no comment for us, the first thing you think is, why? Why isn't that person, why isn't that organization being transparent? And so there's risk in not saying something. There is certainly risk in saying something, but there's also risk in not saying something. And I think that's what people forget sometimes. And so I really advise people, no comment is not an option for you.
And Patrick Dix, tell us a little bit about your transition from broadcast journalism for a news station to Shazam, and a little bit about your new company.
So I did about 25 years in broadcast journalism and was in Des Moines, Iowa. That's where Shazam is headquartered. And I knew someone who had worked at Shazam for a while, and they offered me the opportunity to come in and run a public relations department for them. They didn't have one at that point, and so it was a nice challenge. It was a great place to start because they didn't have anything, and so whatever we built at the time was really what we had. And so it was a great place for me to learn. I've learned so much about the payments industry. Shazam is one of 3 companies in the country that own and operate their own core, Debit Network, and debit processing. We are the only one of those 3 that is owned by its community bank members and is operated by and as a nonprofit. So we're a for-profit company under a nonprofit umbrella, and what that means is that we can offer much better value to our members in our network than a lot of our competitors can, because I don't have to worry about a Wall Street quarterly report. I worry about taking the money that we earn and putting it back into the products and services and making sure that we keep prices low for our community banks that we serve around the country. About 1,000 community banks, community financial institutions around the country that we serve coast to coast. We're focused mostly in the Midwest. That's where we grew up, but expanding out to places like the Northeast. And we do anything you'd expect from a debit network and core processing, digital banking, mobile banking, fraud monitoring. All of those things are kind of under our umbrella at Shazam.
Patrick Dix, great to see you here at the Independent Bankers Association of New York State. Thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, Ken.
Our pleasure. This is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services at Verona, New York.